2.1.1 Premises. Who is responsible for complying with this section? Responsibility lies with the manufacturers, packagers, labelers, importers, and distributors. What is the requirement? Premises must be designed, constructed, and maintained in a manner that permits activities to be conducted under sanitary conditions. So, what exactly does this mean? Well, to start, you must ensure that your building is of adequate size and ensure that production and non-production areas are separate and clearly marked. Ideally, you should have a floor plan in place showing the location and size of each area, its designated purpose, and, if possible, the general flow of personnel and materials. There must be adequate space, so when audited, typically, the auditor will look, for example, at your quarantine area and compare it to your receiving records. And they may say something to the effect of, your receiving records show that you've received 8 pallets, but your quarantine area only holds room for 4 pallets. Likewise, they'll often look at the production area and how the equipment is set up. Is it set up as it should be, in an enclosed area with limited access? Or is it set in the middle of a warehouse? During production, there should be no direct access to the production area from the outside or from the receiving area. We don't want exhaust fumes blowing in and affecting your product. You must also ensure that no holes or gaps are there, unless part of the design. That is, holes or gaps in the walls, ceilings, or floor. Why? Because you don't want an entry point for pests, or spots that can harbor them, or places where dirt can accumulate. You must also ensure that surfaces permit cleaning. That is, they're accessible, sealed, and non-shedding. Now, obviously, how strict you are in applying this will depend on the area. In areas where the product is exposed, such as production areas, the ceiling above should not be so high that it cannot be reached for cleaning. Nor should it be made of a porous foam material. Not only is that material hard to clean, but it can harbor microorganisms. Nor should the ceiling be made of stucco. It might look nice, but you can't clean it without breaking off little bits and pieces. On the other hand, such ceilings may be adequate in areas where product or raw materials are not exposed, such as warehouse areas. But these areas should still be accessible to visible inspection. Example, to check for mold or accumulating dirt. You must also ensure that there's adequate ventilation, filtration, and lighting. What does this mean? It means ensuring that there's no potential for cross-contamination, either from the outside or from other areas in the facility. Ideally, air vents feeding your production areas should be filtered, and the production areas should be under a positive pressure differential. What is adequate lighting? This simply means that there's sufficient lighting for people to see what they're doing. This is especially important in areas where visual inspections are conducted. You must ensure that appropriate plumbing and water supply is available. Water for processing and cleaning should be potable, that is, drinkable. So if you're using municipal water, that should suffice. But you must ensure that there's no further potential for contamination once the water has entered your facility. For example, dead legs in the piping. You must ensure that floor drains are screened and trapped. Why? To prevent gases from venting back through the drains. You should ensure that explosion-proof bulbs and fixtures are installed. Again, this applies mainly wherever product is exposed. Why? Because you don't want bits of glass in your product. Sometimes a bulb can shatter and the bulb can go unnoticed. You must also ensure that humidity and temperature are controlled. This is an area that often results in non-compliance observations during inspections, so we do want to look at it in a bit of detail. You should establish limits for temperature and relative humidity. Limits should be based on stability of products, raw materials, or packaging materials. In other words, they should not be arbitrary. Continuous monitoring devices are ideal. Some facilities will use an ordinary thermometer and will record the readings once a day. The NHPD will accept this, but it's not ideal. It doesn't capture weekends, holidays, or nights. Continuous monitoring devices, therefore, are ideal. You should also take into consideration microclimate variations when locating your sensors. There could be differences in temperature in various locations, near entrances or high up near ceilings where heat rises or where lights are. You should be monitoring the extremes. You should also have action plans in place for dealing with alert limit breaches. This is what you do when the temperature limit is exceeded. You should have an SOP, or standard operating procedure, in place for dealing with this. Do you adjust the HVAC system? Or do you relocate the materials? Finally, you must keep records of the monitoring activities. For example, with a temperature chart or logbook. There are 3 important reasons for this. 1. You'll want to know what your facility is capable of by keeping a long-term history. 2. You'll have a record for troubleshooting and for investigation purposes. For example, if one of your liquids is precipitating, this could be a temperature issue. Or if one of your powders is clumping, it could be an issue of moisture or humidity. 3. You'll have records on hand to show Health Canada during an inspection, or if requested during a site license renewal application.